We've been sciencing, mate.
Oh, I'm excited about this because I don't know the results.
You don't know the results yet?
I don't.
So, yeah. Well, welcome back to the RCA channel, people. I'm going to give you the results, Cam.
Okay.
Well, I've just concluded a crank length test. Now, this was, we had a video about this maybe 2-3 months ago. I promised you guys it would take me only 6 weeks and it took me about 12, which is about right for me.
You've been thorough.
I've been over-promising and under-delivering for years. So what we've done is Michael from Creative Carbon Wheels has very generously lent us a whole bunch of different crank lengths using the O'Leary X310 cranks. These are some beautiful carbon cranks that Michael brings in straight out of China, and he was very generous and he lent me some 155s, some 160s and some 172.5s. Now, for a bit of reference, a bit of background here, I've been running 165s forever, for probably best part of 10 years now. So what we were interested in testing here was what happens when you change crank length, because I've been telling people certain things for many, many years about what happens when you change your crank length, and some of that was actually a little bit wrong.
Oh, look out.
Yes.
He's admitting he's wrong.
Yep.
Love it.
Yeah, one of the things that the big headline act here, which we'll get to in the second video, which we're going to film straight after this one, is that you won't typically see a reduction in your peak sprint power. Turns out I was a little bit wrong on that topic, so we'll delve into that in video number 2. The first video we're going to do here is all about what happens and what you need to do when you change your crank length. What do you need to do to your position? So I just got to make sure before we start.
Oh, look out.
Is it? Yeah, it's good.
Is the pen working?
It is good. Look at that.
Yeah, look out. Is that a Hambini joke?
I don't know. I thought I was the only one to come up with that. But it is definitely working.
Okay, good.
It is definitely working. Now, what I've written out for you guys here is the positional changes that I had to go through when I changed the crank lengths. So going from 165s, I did the tests. We've got a whole protocol here. We did some sprint tests and stuff, which I'll show you in the next video. We went from 155s for a week, then down to 165s for a week, then 155s, then 160, then 172.5. And I deliberately jumped between the crank lengths so that there was no sort of acclimatization to one more than the other. And we wanted to basically see, as my fitness changed across this month that I did these tests, we didn't want my fitness level influencing the results too much. So I jumped in this order to try and alleviate a little bit of that problem. When you change crank lengths, you need to change your position quite a lot. Now, my original starting seat height here, 755 millimeters with 34 millimeters of seat setback. That means my saddle's 755 millimeters above the bottom bracket, and it's 34 millimeters behind the bottom bracket in a horizontal plane. When I went to the 155s, 10 millimeters shorter crank, you'll notice that there was a 13 millimeter upwards seat height move. Now this is really interesting. You would expect that as your leg reaches through the bottom of the stroke, you've got 10 millimeters less far to reach to the bottom of the stroke. So typically you would want to start by raising the saddle 10 millimeters. The other thing that's going to occur is as that crank comes around, your leg is going to be, or your foot is going to be less far towards the front of the bike with a shorter crank. So your foot is not going to be as far forward, which means that your pelvis typically needs to move back as you shorten your cranks. Now, as it goes up 13 millimeters, the saddle's going to go back about 3. I've also had to move it another 9 from there. So I've ended up with effectively, 9 millimeters more seat setback here and 13 millimeters more seat height. Why is it not a one-to-one change? The answer lies in neuromuscular coordination. So the much shorter cranks were much easier for me to coordinate the act of pedaling and controlling the bottom of the stroke. So as I've actually gone up 10 millimeters, I've had to go 13 up here because 10 millimeters just felt way too cramped. So this is an interesting topic here. You will see people shortening their cranks and they always email me and say, hey, I've gone down to 165s. How much do I raise my seat? The answer is usually not quite a one-to-one relationship with the crank length change. It's more like sort of 1 to 1.2. So, you will always want to try, for example, with a 10 millimeter jump, you'll want to try your seat 10 millimeters higher and then maybe up another 3 and then maybe up another 3 from there. I have seen people need as much as 16 millimeters of extra seat height for a 10 millimeter crank length change. Now, hopefully that makes sense. Seat goes up, seat goes back when the cranks get shorter. Jumping to the 160s, these are only 5 millimeters shorter than my starting point, and this, obviously, 6 millimeters up, that makes sense, 4 millimeters back, so not quite as large of a jump with the saddle position. The seat still needs to be higher, but it's only a little bit over that 5 millimeters that you'd expect with the 5 millimeter crank length change. And the last one, the longest ones, the 172.5s, 12 millimeters down, and obviously these are 7.5 millimeters longer than my original cranks. So this is quite a big move. The interesting thing about this is I had a lot of trouble controlling the 172.5s because they're so much longer. So my neuromuscular coordination was not quite there. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like using these, because when I go to them, I have to drop the seat a lot to maintain proper pedal stroke control across the bottom of the stroke. Seat had to go forward 2 millimeters. I actually ran out of seat set forward here because obviously with the longer crank, as that arm comes around, your foot is a lot further towards the front of the bike, which means your pelvis needs to be further forward. And I ran out of adjustment. Ideally, I would have liked the seat probably another 4 or 5 millimeters further forward than that. So this is a good pro forma for what you should do if you're changing crank lengths. You know, you're going up, you're going down. Don't utilize a 1-to-1 seat height change all the time. Sometimes it's a bit more like 1.2-to-1 or something like that. It is not always a 1-to-1 seat height change with the crank length.
I've got a question. What felt the most unusual?
Definitely, that's a good question. It was a tie. It was a tie between the 155s and the 172.5s.
Oh, interesting.
The two extremes.
Okay.
I was half expecting to like the 155s.
Okay.
And I really hated them.
Really?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and that's the topic of the second half of this video, which we'll go through now. Why does this vary so much? Why do you get such different answers for crank lengths between people? There's a lot of factors. We've spoken about some of these in previous videos. Things like your neuromuscular type. So if you've got really stocky, short, powerful legs, lots of neuromuscular power, you're going to have less trouble producing short bursts of high intensity power with shorter cranks. I'm the exact opposite. Long legs, very, very lean. I had a lot of trouble with the 155s generating short burst efforts. And this was the big takeaway, was that with my 165 cranks, if I have to, I can produce about 550 watts, maybe 600 watts seated for a couple of seconds in a bunch ride. With these, no chance. It was about 380 watts was the absolute maximum I could produce with the 155s, simply because of the length of the arm not allowing that instantaneous burst power as much. So this was a real problem. These cranks were fantastically aerodynamic because I could bend forwards much better, I could get much lower down to the front end, but when it actually came time to surge in a fast bunch ride, absolute rubbish.
I remember RCA coach Ryan Kavanagh was riding behind you and he said you looked odd.
He said I looked odd.
He did.
Like a monkey on a tricycle or something, yes.
He really noticed it.
He really noticed it, yeah. That was right before I smashed him on that bunch ride.
Are you sure you did? Yeah, righto.
Maybe not, maybe not. So yes, it was a real problem. The 155s were a real problem. The 172s, I had to move my hands way back off the hoods. I felt like I needed a 10 millimeter shorter stem because I couldn't get down to the bars, and there was a lot of neuromuscular power, but winding it up at high cadence for a long sustained effort, nowhere near as good. So it sort of reinforced my my theory here about the 165s being the best for me, but individual results may vary. So everyone's going to have a different experience. And this brings me to the pros and cons. The pros and cons of these different crank lengths for me, with this kind of seat height and with my body, the 155s were terrible for neuromuscular power generation. Now, if I was on a climb and the cadence got below about 85, couldn't get back on top of the gear. So on steep gradients, these things were a huge problem. I just found I just could not stay on top of the cadence, and my power just dropped right off as soon as the cadence got low. And this makes sense because the shorter they are, the higher you have to keep your cadence for a given power output, because power output is a function of both the length of the crank arm and the cadence that you're spinning them at and the force to the pedals.
Let's not forget about street cred as well.
Street cred with the short cranks, absolutely. I missed out on a bit of that, mate.
Yeah.
But the 172s, no problems. Standing up, climbing and seated, I had heaps of punch, but I could not sustain a 20-minute effort anywhere near as well as I could with the 165s. And not only that, the big thing obviously that everyone's gonna jump on us about is the aerodynamics. The 165s, I can maintain a pretty low tuck. You'll see in some spliced over footage that we've got here that I can actually tuck down pretty low with these and be reasonably aerodynamic. The 172s, I had to keep bringing my hand back off the hood all the time and sitting much more upright, much more in the wind. So a huge amount of aerodynamic loss for me with those. So the trade-offs are neuromuscular power generation. If you've got a major physiological problem, you might need shorter cranks and that sort of stuff versus having the longer ones. Seat height, which is a function of leg length, and then your particular requirements with your physiology. So I'm very slow twitch, not a lot of neuromuscular power. These short cranks were a huge problem, and I didn't gain a lot from the 172s. So for me, the trade-off is definitely still best here at the 165mm length. Everyone who's got different seat heights and different bodies is going to have a different experience here, but that has been my experience running the shorter cranks. Any questions, Cameron?
I want to know about the power numbers.
The power numbers.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for video number 2.
Look out.
Video number 2, power numbers.